Obviously, big week in front of us. Another divisional game here. Green Bay got to go up there and obviously play an outstanding Green Bay Packers team that went to the conference championship game. Team that's got a great amount of talent, some great players, and are just doing a really good job. So for us, we're obviously hitting this on the field today. We'll be out without pads on today, kind of working some different aspects of the game. A couple guys that probably be out for practice. They might be out there to start, and we'll see what it looks like. Hunter Bryant, Kenny Galladay, Trufant probably won't do anything. Darryl Roberts, Vaitai, and Nick Williams will be out there. We'll see how it goes at the start of practice and progress forward from there. So those are kind of the major ones for us from that standpoint. We added Chris Jones, a defensive corner, onto the roster. Obviously, Justin going on short-term IR yesterday. That's pretty much it for the roster. And we'll just dive into Green Bay.
Start us off, Larry.
Good morning, Matt. With no fans in the stands, how does that add another wrinkle in terms of communication with your players, maybe not shouting things that you would normally to them during the game because they can hear you across the field?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Definitely there's some communication on both sides of the ball that we're trying to make sure that we keep moving or change or signal or have different ways to get that out to everybody. With the first run at it here this past weekend, definitely was a situation where we can hear a lot more maybe than what we anticipated before. So we got to do a good job of keeping that moving from that standpoint.
Chris?
Morning, Matt.
Morning.
So you've talked a lot, and Corey talked yesterday when we talked to him about, just sort of how the pass rush and coverage really, marriage, there's a marriage there, everything, you have to look at everything as a whole. But I guess I'm wondering how you evaluate the pass rush on its own then. Can you explain just sort of after a game, when you're looking at it, what sort of things you're trying to evaluate there as opposed to taking everything together?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, you break it down in different stages, rushes where you're just looking at the individual technique and maybe the particular offensive set and the defensive pass rush move and how effective that was. Trying to take into account the situation, but the individual itself. Then you look at the scheme rush on top of it. Maybe it's two guys working together. Maybe it's how a particular attack point that we might have in a protection scheme. Not everything is usually one-on-one blocks. There's usually five normal defenses, 4-man rush, 5-man blocking with a chip help of a sixth running back or something like that. So there's going to be guys that are 2-on-1. There's going to be guys that are 1-on-1. We're going to try to read different slide protections and be able to take advantages of the, call it the break points, where the slide goes and try to use some natural sort of games at that point to be able to create pressure in the middle of the pocket. So you evaluate all that first, the individual technique, and then the pass rush against the protection itself. We usually call that 5-on-4 just to see what that looked like. And then, incorporate what is the game situation? Is it an early down? Is it a play action transition? Is it a drop back pass? Is it 90s? Is it, or 3-step? Is it, something that may be a third down and shorter versus third down and medium? Because then that all goes into the game plan rush. If you have a longer time to get to the quarterback based on the down and distance, then we can do maybe a little bit more of an elaborate sort of pass rush game or pass rush move. If it's a situation where the ball's coming out faster, then the pass rush tends to be a little bit more vertical and push into the pocket, trying to get in the throwing lanes. So it's kind of multi-layered there. And then obviously the coverage, and then you add that in to the last factor. But you certainly look at the individual effort and the individual one-on-one production first.
Mike?
Yeah, hey, Matt. I'm curious with the new injured reserve rules and how that's changed. What goes into making the decision to put a player on IR versus not? Because before it seemed fairly cut and dry of the guy's really hurt, he's there. If not, you're going to wait it out. How has that changed for you?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously the time and the length and then the injury type. So certainly with, let's just go on the shorter term of it. If we have some of maybe the pulls and the strains that we've had in some of the soft tissue injuries that we know are in the, call it 10 to 14 day window, then obviously the short-term IR is something that doesn't really help us, and obviously the times are all approximate, everybody's body heals differently. So you just try to go off general injury information there. Then there are going to be, in just staying with soft tissue injuries, for instance, the soft tissue injuries that might be the 4 to 6 to 6 to 8 week windows. And then you really got to gauge, okay, what is the value of the short-term situation versus the long-term situation. And, sometimes maybe if the guy's a quick healer, sometimes if the guy can come back early, or if they're not, if it's something that's not obviously non-surgical situations here is what we're talking about. And then obviously, the ones that are major that require surgery or longer timelines, then, you move into the next category from there. But I think it's really been a very interesting new rule for us from a standpoint of evaluating guys that maybe in the past were 4-week injuries that you would hold on to and you would wait it out, as opposed to the 3-week window and seeing where it goes from there. And even if you're off a week or two on the far end with the short-term IR, it's probably better for the player.
And with corner, where Daryl Roberts pops up as limited today as well. At what point, how do you handle that when it's a position that you have so much kind of, I don't want to say rotation, but there's been so much movement in the last 2 weeks? I mean, you had 7 healthy corners on September 5th, and now I think there's, depending on Okuda, 3 of them, 2? How do you?
Not a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the big thing for that is, we've talked about this before, where we try to cross-train a lot of guys on our team, and certainly in the secondary, obviously there's corners, but there's safeties, and we know that there's going to be some cross-train packages that we can have with that and have those positions backed up. So, that's one way to do it. And we obviously have other players on our team that if an emergency situation, we could move over to there, and then we use our practice squad depth. And then, we identify like a guy like Chris Jones, who was with us before, a couple of years ago, that we know that we liked and we weren't able to hold on to at that time, that we were able to bring back. And, we just go forward from there, and we look at timelines, understanding that maybe 1 week may look really not good, and we got to do the best we can that particular week. But maybe in 2 weeks, with other things that are moving parts with some of the other injuries, may look a lot better. And you just try to make sure you don't overreact 1 week, understanding the bigger picture of what it looks like down the road.
Thanks.
Yep.
Kyle.
I know, Matt, 2 questions for you. First, just on Okuda, he wasn't on your practice list. Is he going to practice today?
Yeah, I think Jeff's going to go out there, and we'll see how it goes during warm up. But I'm anticipating him being able to go through practice, and we'll obviously keep an eye on it from that standpoint. But anticipate him to be out there and go.
Okay. And the second thing is, Daryl talked about this yesterday a little bit, but with how much you can hear at the line of scrimmage now because there's no fans. He was talking about how he's more concerned about signs being relayed to the other team, or how much teams can glean from the TV copy or whatever it is. So I was curious about your process, like going out there looking at the Packers or whatever, if you're listening for that, if you've got a staff that's out there trying to, pick up clues from that. And then how do you go about disguising your own calls going forward?
Yeah. Obviously, it's a huge part of the game, honestly, and we get a lot of information from the TV, and we get a lot of information from previous years of just studying opponents and keeping track and records of the different systems that everybody plays, whether it's offense or defense. A lot of the stuff, honestly, is really pretty common knowledge before the game. What you're trying to identify is what's taking place in game, and if anything's switched. Peyton Manning is a classic example. We're playing Peyton Manning one year, and we knew obviously the audibles at the line of scrimmage. I got 2 young linebackers, Gerard Mayo and Gary Guyton, and we had one of the calls, and first time he said it, they took off, and it was a great play, and 2 young linebackers really excited about the play, and it was a TFL. And the next time he comes to the line of scrimmage and dummies the thing, and Gary goes through the middle, and I think Gerard did too, and pretty sure Clark hit the thing over the middle for about 35 yards deep. So, I just think, you just constantly, you understand the situations, that there's communication out there, but you really got to look at all the other nuances that go along with it. If you get a piece of communication and you say, okay, hey, here's what I heard, but this guy's showing me this, or this formation is showing me that, or, this set is usually this. You take it as what it is, but you still got to go out and play and react at that standpoint. So on the flip side of that, we do have to be conscious of that communication, and certainly if there's something that we think that somebody's tapped into that we need to change. And then signals will be something that, we're just going to have to constantly keep moving.
So two more, Justin then Dave.
Yeah, it's really. Thanks.
Matt, I made some big halftime adjustments to my audio setup here, so hopefully that solves last week's issues. You talk a lot about bad football early in the year, missed tackles, some leverage issues, gap integrity was kind of shaky with the defense in that opener. You mentioned you're not going to be in pads this week, or sorry, not this week, but today. How do you accelerate correcting some of the fundamental flaws you got going on with the defense out of the opener heading into week 2?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a huge problem for us. The plan is just not to be in pads today. We'll see what tomorrow looks like. And sometimes that's trying to make sure we get the guys that we want out there to take a look at it. And sometimes it's more about moving the bodies around, maybe at a quicker tempo than it is slamming into each other. And we'll gauge that day by day. One of the tricky parts of, I think, the NFL in the last couple of years has been how do we practice good fundamentals without being in pads? And I think we've come up with creative ways through the different sled work and the different bags and some of the different drill work, fundamental stuff that we've been able to do. I think we've definitely expanded on those type of individual drills and those type of individual periods throughout the course of practice. So even later in practice where maybe individual periods tend to go away, we're actually going back to doing more individual after or during a team period. So if you're not out in a particular team period, kind of going back and working some of the sled work because at that point you're not slamming into each other. So it's kind of a good opportunity for you to kind of hone in on some of those fundamentals. Obviously from last week, there's areas like you mentioned that we got to get better at. And so do a lot of people in the league. And, if we can do that quicker, we'll be better faster. And that's something that everybody understands. So just trying to keep coming up with creative ways to do it and be disciplined as we're, repping those things and trying to, get better at them. Guys are great though. I mean, they understand it. They know that this is their craft. This is the things they need to work on, and they're going to stay and put extra time into it and do everything they can to get it better.
I wanted to dip really quickly back to the short-term IR. And I know you kind of just take rule changes as they come, but as you're evaluating this initially, do you think maybe this is a good long-term solution for teams and players to have that short IR window, similar to baseball with their short and long-term DL?
Yeah, it's a great conversation piece because I think before we had it, everyone was wishing we had it. From that standpoint, we're all like, gosh, if we had a different way to do this, that'd be great. So now we do. So I think that everyone's trying to use it to the fullest and to the best of the rule. And we'll go back and take a look at it afterward and say, hey, what was the benefits of it, and maybe what was the downside. But I think right now we just try to use it as much as we can.
Thank you, Matt.
Yep.
All right, Dave, last one.
Morning, Matt. Excuse me. Two things. Just want to follow up on what Kyle had asked you about real quick. The changing of the calls. How long does it take for you guys to recognize either defensive checks when you have a veteran quarterback like Stafford or Rodgers, or even when you're going against one of those guys? I don't know if they can change that stuff, mid game. How long does that take to sort of recognize in game?
Yeah, guys that are been playing quarterback for a long time and in the system, they change that stuff pretty quick. They might change it on the next play. They might actually go back to the huddle and be like, hey, I'm going to dummy this call right now. Everybody ignore it because we got to slow the defense down, or vice versa. We do the same thing on defense. So guys do it. I would say this though, early in the season, in the NFL, everyone's a little bit nervous about doing it. I'm sure, again, the veteran quarterbacks like Stafford and Aaron Rodgers and those guys, they feel comfortable being able to do that stuff. But sometimes when you have a lot of new players on the field and you have those situations where you're trying to make dummy calls, it definitely can bite you. It can definitely be, a tough situation. Now, 2009, it was the Saints. I mean, I won't forget this one. We got beat down there, but we had a particular blitz on and we were trying to dummy cadence a coverage call. And, the guy out in the secondary looked right at the safety and gave him the dummy signal back. And, it was all good. And then he played the coverage and went, and we had a guy wide open down the middle of the field. It was a touchdown. It was like 80 yards later. So sometimes there is a little bit of okay, let's just make sure everybody's on the same page. We'll build to that point. So week 2 is a little bit tough. So right now for us, let's just make sure we're being discreet when we use our communication and not give any of that away right away.
Makes sense. The other thing I wanted to ask about was just the dynamics of going on the road this week. I know it's totally different protocols than you're used to. So just from any conversations you've had with counterparts who've give you an idea of what to expect, how much of an emphasis is that week? Just the hotels, the meetings, the buses. How different do you expect things to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great observation because honestly, I think through the month of September, no different than the off-season program and training camp. The first couple weeks, the first 3 weeks, as we get into all of it, because it is so new, there is so much that goes into making sure everybody knows what is happening those weeks. So there's some comfort level to what's being done as opposed to kind of just springing it upon everybody that it does feel like it takes away from just kind of our normal process. So be the same this week as far as how we get on the buses and how we get on the plane and, obviously for our guys being able to fuel them properly for the game and what that looks like, to the hotel situations, to the meeting spaces and making sure that we're socially distant. The mask wearing that we have to do in the hotels and in common spaces that are more public than maybe our building. And sometimes we're just, we're at the mercy of the space that we're in. And then we got to work around those details too, which is, it's all just new challenges. I mean, our operations department, I mean, they're just phenomenal. Gina does a great job of coordinating and just giving us information and making sure that we have, a bunch of different choices to keep everything moving in a way that'll help the team prepare. And really what you're trying to do is just eliminate the distractions. Everybody just wants to stay on their routine as much as they can. Even going to the stadium is going to be different. Each stadium will have a different locker room setup, and some locker rooms are a little bit tighter than others. And how does that affect guys in the locker room or coaches in the locker room? And all of it's just kind of new. I think part of it for us is good. The guys are used to adapting to all of it, but there is still kind of that, first time on the road, let's get it over with. And then it'll be much more comfortable the next time we have to go on the road.
I don't know if you know this, but does Green Bay or Appleton, are there any restrictions on, size, like how many people you can have in a ballroom? Is there anything that will change, dramatically from your pregame or your night before stuff?
Yeah. Yep. There are restrictions with all that stuff in the hotels, and a lot of it's based on the space that we have available to us, in trying to keep everybody distant. Obviously with, just our general COVID testing rules and the contact tracing, we have to make sure that we have enough space so that if something happens, the contact tracing doesn't, affect us too from that standpoint. So all of the setups have to be a little bit different than what they've been in the past. And some of the space is definitely different. And some of the meeting times are different, even, I know it's not really what you asked, but on Monday for us, that was entirely new for us to do a team meeting the day after a game virtual, and not be able to actually get in there and, coach the guys in person or show the video in person where, as the head coach, I'm trying to correct the game. And, maybe the video is skipping a little bit. Maybe I fear that a coaching point might be lost because the translation of the video through the Zoom call isn't necessarily on point. And obviously everything is, done after that with the position coaches in smaller groups. But, it's an unsteady, uneasy feeling from that standpoint until we get used to it, which we will. And then, we'll be okay.
Appreciate that. I figure Green Bay is someplace you're used to going, and it may be totally different. So
it definitely is. It's going to be, and we know that. We've actually tried to make some adjustments, like I said, ahead of time, anticipating some of that stuff in the spring. So we'll see how that looks.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Coach. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Coach.
Okay. Take care.